Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Welcome, everyone, to Two Middle-Aged Guys Trying to Work It All Out. We're here for another episode. How does that sit with you, Dave?
Oh, well, let me think about it. It says pretty good.
Pretty good?
I'm okay.
All right. Well, you know, maybe...
What are you kidding? I'm so excited.
Oh, that's what I thought.
Wow.
All right. Man, you had me worried there for a second. I thought maybe you got bored of our podcast.
I don't pay the mortgage on T-Mag Studios to not record podcasts. That's a very
fair.
Clumsy sentence.
But I understood it, and I think our listeners did too. Because if you're not on our brainwave links at this point, people, I don't know what to do for you. But
so
anyway,
you can send us an email and tell us why you're not.
That'd be fantastic. Where would they send that email to?
That would be us, US, at the @ shift 2, to the numeral 2, middleagedguys.com.
Yes. And if you didn't get that, then you can go to the numeral 2, middleagedguys.com. I've screwed it up.
Wow.
Let's try that again.
Broke the internet.
They're not going to know where to go, Dave.
Right.
It is the numeral 2, middleagedguys.com.
That's right.
And
see
that's
our fancy
where,
artwork?
Yes, that's where you can find the email to email us. You can also find us on Twitter, on Facebook.
That's right.
On all the socials, doing the social thing.
I wrote an essay.
Did you?
A little short essay.
That's right, you did.
About a movie theater experience.
Yeah.
You guys go check it out. And
that's right. We're branching out into all kinds of things.
Yeah, if you're from Creator Syndicate, and you want to hire me to write a weekly article about a movie theater that I went to once,
He's available.
I am available. I mean, I could
also
probably get 2 articles out of that.
Well, I think you get 3. But also, we haven't talked about this yet. We also have a YouTube channel now.
That's right.
Where if you want to get your podcasts from YouTube, you can go there and see everything that we've published. And we're toying with...
You can hear everything we publish.
That's fair. I guess you can't see it.
Because some people like to get their audio from a video website.
Yes. And also, they just launched YouTube podcasts, so that's now a thing. So we're cutting edge, people. We were there when YouTube podcasts launched.
It's interesting. Maybe a little shop talk here for us podcast professionals, but everybody try your best to follow along. YouTube podcasts, Google podcasts. Is this another situation where we're looking at maybe Google is going to slim down and brand their podcast
through YouTube? I mean, that's what they did with their music.
Yeah.
Because there used to be Google Music, and now it's just YouTube Music. So, yeah, I think that's what they're doing. But, I mean, Google is definitely the company that's like, try our new thing. Oh, we quit doing the new thing.
Yes.
So.
Hey, you know what? That's... they learn. They make mistakes quickly, and they learn, right? So I respect that.
Sure, but there's been more than once where I'm like, but I was using that with the... Okay. So anyway, that's Google. But, while we're on this topic of podcasts in general, I've got a little bit of podcast news for us, Dave. You ready for this?
I think so.
We are huge in Belgium.
Really?
We have either 5 listeners in Belgium or one person who's listened to 5 episodes.
Could it be one fellow with 5 names, like Jean-Claude Van Damme Smith?
I don't think so. I don't think it would register for each name.
Okay.
But I'm not. Maybe I'm not understanding how analytics work.
Well, I mean, Belgium law dictates
that
you can download once for each part of your name.
I had no idea. I'm glad that you're such a professional in Belgian law.
Is he Belgian?
Van Damme is, I believe so.
Okay. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That whole I would have been really
muscles
embarrassed.
from Brussels.
The muscles from Brussels. Yeah.
So anyway, now podcast listeners, I don't want to play favorites. I love you all, but whoever that 1 to up to 5 people in Belgium are.
They're our favorites. They're absolutely our favorites.
Congratulations and welcome to the podcast, and we hope you enjoy it. So I couldn't let that go without pointing that out.
I'm excited. I hope that they meant to listen to us.
I mean, it's 5 times.
5. That's a lot of mistakes.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm going to assume that they're super fans at this point. So anyway, shout out to our listeners in Belgium. But Dave, I have a different concern that I need to talk to you about.
What's that, Chris?
On my way to T-Mag Studios today, I'm driving down the highway, and I'm pretty sure I saw myself driving down the other side of the highway backwards.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was an inverted me, and that I'd already recorded this podcast.
It was, yeah. You didn't see yourself walk into the turnstile backwards?
No, I didn't, and we have a turnstile.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I'm not going to talk about Judy. In fact, we're not going to talk about Judy at all. We're going to keep her out of it.
2 weeks ago, I had the turnstile come in. You're getting the...
Okay.
You will be getting the bill, I guess. You haven't gotten it yet.
But the other me has paid it already, I assume.
No, that's not how bills work.
Oh.
An inverted person can't pay a normal time bill. They can only pay inverted bills. So you're gonna get that and have to pay. They're very, very expensive.
Well, I guess I'll see it when we're done recording now, but we've already recorded.
Don't think too hard about it.
Okay.
You think this bit worked?
I don't know if this bit worked
Maybe
or not.
Maybe it worked backwards.
But I will tell you that this is now finally the Christopher Nolan episode.
What?
Of two middle-aged guys trying to work it all out.
So I didn't have to have a turnstile installed?
You didn't have to. No.
Oh, boy. It's very dangerous radiation. That is the inverted time sketch, ladies and gentlemen.
We thought long and hard about that. You're welcome. No need to email us and tell us how much you enjoyed it.
Oh, I think we just got a cease and desist letter that came from Nolan backwards through time. That means we should do more.
We do it because we love.
Because we love Nolan.
Why. So yeah, today's the Christopher Nolan episode, and you would have thought that all of the talk we've done about Christopher Nolan since the inception of this podcast, see what I did there?
Yeah.
All right. That this might have come sooner, but no, here we are, episode 9, Christopher Nolan.
Christopher Nolan, yes. One of our favorite directors, I would say. I mean, maybe how much he is our favorite will come out, and we can compare and contrast. But huge Nolan fan. Did you know that Nolan is spelled the same backwards and forwards?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing! Just like Tenet is.
It's not. But it's close. It's really, really close.
Well, now you've ruined my day.
Yeah. He had his name changed. His name was Radar, but he switched to Nolan
because he knew it would be 2 on the nose.
2 on the nose.
That's smart.
That's smart guy.
That's what he is.
So you have another director. Let's do a compare and contrast, just really quick.
Okay.
You also love Steven Spielberg.
Huge fan,
right? And so when setting Nolan next to Spielberg, where does Nolan stack up from where they're at in their careers right now?
So very good point that they're in different points of their careers. I think as much as I love Spielberg, he's in his 70s. He's not going to be around for forever. Nolan still got a lot of years to go, a lot of films to make. I still pound for pound prefer Spielberg, but Chris Nolan maybe has the distinction of he's never made a movie I didn't like, whereas I can't say that about Spielberg. There are a couple in his oeuvre that I'm not super fond of. So point to Chris Nolan there. I think Nolan's films tend to be more intellectual than Spielberg's films. Yeah. I think Spielberg's films tend to be more emotional than Nolan's films.
And they're popcorny.
They can be. Films, they can be sometimes. But I almost feel like they're popcorny because they become popular. Like when they're made, well, I mean, I guess you could argue that Indy is a popcorn film no matter what. But anyway, Nolan is, I think he's less visual than Spielberg is. Which is not necessarily a knock. I mean, Spielberg is extraordinarily visual in his storytelling, and Nolan is certainly competent. I mean, he doesn't make framing mistakes or composition mistakes or anything like that. But he's more there to say, I'm going to give you the information you need to follow the story. Whereas Spielberg says, I'm going to give you the information you need to follow the story in a very cool way. So those are some differences in some ways they stack up.
Interesting. So I think you made a really good point that Nolan produced less content, but he's not made a stinker yet, or as we'll get into it, maybe he has, but we can talk more through it. I would say this, that I'll use a sports analogy because our fans, if they're known for one thing,
it's sports.
They love the sports ball or whatever. Steven Spielberg is Nolan Ryan, right? Nolan Ryan, famous pitcher. Nolan Ryan is the all-time leader in strikeouts. For non-sports fans, that's a good thing for a pitcher. They want to be the all-time leader in strikeouts. Nolan Ryan's also the all-time leader in walks. That's not a good thing for pitchers. So when you have the kind of output, the breadth of a career like a Nolan Ryan, which is just like a Steven Spielberg, you're going to have lots of not so great alongside of the great. And I think that's where Spielberg is, right? Is that he has had, he's had more room to make mistakes.
Sure.
And he's been more willing to do films that have not been great. Whereas I think that, Nolan has been extremely disciplined in how he's chosen his projects and leaves a whole lot less room, for that type of criticism.
And we may get into this, but has there been a film Nolan has made that he did not write?
Well, we will get into that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that there's a little bit of that. So,
okay.
But yeah. So I think that the frames them. I prefer. I am not. I like Spielberg. I'm not a anti-Spielberg. But I much prefer Nolan. Right. If I was making a list of my favorite directors, top 10, Spielberg's probably not going to be on that list.
Not even top 10.
Not even top 10. I think he's competent.
All right.
But not necessarily special.
Fair enough
to me. So, but Nolan very much is, right. Nolan is my favorite filmmaker. So when did you find yourself getting introduced to the work of Christopher Nolan?
I was introduced with Batman Begins. That was the first Chris Nolan movie I saw. How far do you want me to take this? Do you want me to analyze Begins now, or just say that was the first?
Let's just kind of deal with your first, and we'll analyze them each step by step.
Absolutely. So that was my first exposure to Nolan, and that was enough for me to say, who is this guy, and what else has he done?
My first exposure was with, as many people, was with Memento. And we had a neighbor at the time that we agreed on absolutely nothing. We got along with him, but we were, we had tastes, everything, disagreement, right? But we got along, and they said, you need to come watch this movie. It's great. And we found something we agreed on, which is this movie's pretty spectacular. And certainly unlike anything we had ever seen before. Sure. In terms of, it was smart, it was well done, it was very well acted. Guy Pearce, Carrie-Anne Moss, the other little guy from The Matrix, Joe Pants. Joey Pants. Joey Pants. So that's how, and I think a lot of people we introduced the same way we did, right? Yes. Memento, or in his follow-up, Batman, which were
not the follow-up. Insomnia.
Insomnia was the follow-up. You are very right. Yeah, I should have known that. But yeah, a lot of people were introduced in that. But stepping back just a little bit, before Chris Nolan had made Memento, he had made his formal education was not in filmmaking, but he did make corporate and industrial films, which I would love to see one of those, like, here's how you deal with a insider trading situation, and
with the Chris Nolan flair.
With the Chris Nolan flair, like, it turns out the stocks had traded you all along. I don't know. I'm having trouble thinking. But imagine how neat that would have been. But he also did some short films. He was making, as a kid, he made some little stop motion things called Space Wars, which is a little Star Wars thing. Apparently, those exist. It sounds very cute, but he has not released them. He owns them himself. He also did some short movies. In '90 he made a short film called Tarantula. He did with a friend of his, Rocco Bellic, who is apparently now a movie producer. It's available. Tarantella, not tarantula.
Oh, okay.
So
it's not about a big spider?
It's not. Well, it's spiders in it.
Okay.
But like a television, Tarantella. Honestly, it's about 5 minutes long. You can find it online. It's absolutely horrible. It looks like the kind of thing a teenager would do and think, oh man, I'm really smart and talented, and
I'm the next Spielberg.
Here's a close-up of my eyeball, and I look kind of like a vampire in that shot.
I've made those films.
Yeah, right, and and then he did another short film called Larceny, 8 or 9 minute short film. It's about a burglary. Nolan has it, will not release it. So you can't find that one online. And then he did another one right before he broke out called Doodlebug. Have you seen this one?
I've not.
Very bizarre little short film, about 3 minutes long, about a guy trying to kill a bug. And it turns out the bug is him. And it's also it looks kind of like a maybe like a filmed stage play or like Twilight Zone or Dark Shadows, that sort of look. It's pretty cheesy and like again
learning
like
his craft.
Learning his craft. It shows that he wasn't like great out of the gate, right? So and then he went on from there he went on to make his first real film, which was a 16mm black and white production called Following.
Yeah.
And have you seen Following?
I have not.
Okay.
It's not one that is easily accessible to me. At least I couldn't find it on any of the billion services I subscribe to. So no, I have not seen Following.
So I saw it back in the day. I watched it a little bit after Prestige, I think. Right after Prestige, I said, I'm going to go back and
Is it a feature-length film, or is it a short film?
It's about 70 minutes long.
Okay.
And I believe it did have a limited theatrical release. Although I had kind of trouble finding information on that. He made it for about £6,000, so $15K or so in today's money. And it's got your Nolan trademarks, interesting cinematography, twists and turns, and nothing is what it seems, and questions of identity and motivation. He was inspired to do it. I saw an interview when he was doing some people watching, and his house got broke into, and he started to kind of connect things and came up with the idea for Following. And it's actually a very pretty film. It's a bit, it's a first feature, right? It's got some amateurish stuff, but it certainly has got some style, and you can see, his vision becomes, he has a unique vision, and you can start to see it crystallize.
Did Wally Pfister shoot that, or did he start with Memento?
He started with Memento. Okay. He did his own cinematography for this particular film.
Gotcha.
So so Following, I was trying to remember how I got a hold of it, and I think in the early days of Netflix, like early days of streaming Netflix,
when they were just throwing anything on
when
there.
they were throwing anything, I think maybe I got it there, or I might have got it, been able to find a disc. But I did watch it through legal means, and I'm pretty sure it was Netflix oriented. I could be wrong, but I'm thinking that's how I saw it. But definitely, if you're a Nolan fan, it's worth watching to kind of complete your education.
I need to track it down.
Yeah,
I do.
And it's worthwhile. It's a good way to spend 60-70 minutes.
I'm very fascinated with people's first films, and so it's interesting to know that Nolan had this growth to him, and I kind of appreciate that. So yeah, I'm excited to see Following.
But as we said, my first exposure was in 2000 to Memento. Watched it at my neighbor's house, and was just wow. This is special.
Yeah.
This guy's someone to watch, and it's smart. Maybe it's smart enough that you might want to watch it twice to make sure you put all the pieces together. It's sad.
Yeah.
When it deals with how his wife really died. Difficult to watch. And difficult to see someone in that state being taken advantage of, which he was. He was being used.
Yes.
But it's a really enjoyable film. And I think you realize that we were all going to be in for something special with this guy's work, and he was someone to follow.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a really interesting movie. It's very interesting the way it's constructed, based on a short story that his brother wrote. According to the credits, anyway. I just picking that up from watching the movie. I'd be fascinated to find that short story. I don't know if it was published or if it was just something that he'd written in the family, and then Chris Nolan was like, "That's the one I'm going to do." Incredibly smart, and I'm going to say that's first film. Sure, Following, but his first endeavor in Hollywood. Very smart. It's so localized. It's so almost claustrophobic. In the way that it's made. There's 4 or 5 locations to it. There's 3 principal actors, which is smart because that's not a lot to have to control, because what he is controlling is the narrative. And he's controlling the way that the narrative is delivered to the audience in such a specific way that I'll be honest, the first time I saw it, like halfway through, I was so on the edge of my seat that I was tempted to pause the movie and look it up on Wikipedia to see what the heck was going on. I was like, I can't wait to see how this movie's going to end, because I was just that excited about it. It is not the first Nolan film I saw, like I had said, but man, it still holds up, you know.
You saw it after Batman Begins.
I did.
Right? Was it just after, or?
Yes.
Okay.
It was just after I saw Batman Begins. Blown away by that film. Christopher Nolan directed. Was not familiar with that name. Looked up and saw Memento and Insomnia, and immediately sought out those 2 films.
Yeah. It set the tone for the rest of his career, right?
It really did, and it reminds me. Structurally, it reminds me a lot of Tenet, which we'll get to and we'll talk about. But I wonder how conscious he was of that they're playing with time in very similar ways.
Do you know who did the soundtrack for Memento? Because I don't.
No, I don't.
You know, his film soundtracks are very important and impactful. They're like another character.
Yeah.
But that's not one I have a note about.
Honestly, I don't have a good memory of the soundtrack of that film.
It's been a while since I've seen that one. It's one that I would have liked to have come back and watched, but I didn't necessarily have time.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on, though, to the next movie, which is one I did watch in prep for this, because I had not watched it in years, which was Insomnia.
Yep.
And this was, he did not write this one.
Oh,
He was the director. He did not write it. It was a remake of a movie that had been made a few years prior, a Norwegian film of, I believe, the same name, Insomnia, or, translated from the Norwegian Insomnia, or I don't know. That's the Swedish chef.
Exactly.
Insomnia. And it is the straightest Nolan film.
Agreed.
It is it's got some stuff going on. Don't get me wrong. It's not simple. But it is not the twist or turn curve, right? Mm-hmm. The mystery isn't particularly mysterious. They solve it. What is the real mystery is, what is this guy going to do?
It's more of a suspense.
It's
film.
more, and it's really him versus himself. What is he going to? What sacrifices is he going to make to put this guy, Robin Williams, in maybe the best performance of Robin Williams' career? What's he going to do to put him away? What Al Pacino will do? And it's kind of interesting to think, wow, Nolan and Al Pacino, and great talent in the film with Williams. It's the least trademarky Nolan movie. It's kind of like Nolan's, forgive me, but I'm going to use a Tarantino thing. It's Nolan's Jackie Brown.
Okay.
Right? It's not an original work like Jackie Brown was. Tarantino was an original work. But it's still very well done. It's not a trademark Christopher Nolan film in that any competent director could have probably made it. Mm-hmm. It'd been nearly as good. But it was like his second movie, right? This one's for the studio.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, and every director of note always has this part in their career where they're building their power, and even though Memento was this shock of a film that did well, I mean, when it was released, it did well, and people recognized it, and they were like, that's amazing. But he still didn't have the collateral. Right. He couldn't at that point say, well, now I'm going to do my opus, So I wonder how much of Insomnia was the studio saying, yeah, good job with the Memento. Here's your next job. Right. And exactly. And as an up-and-coming director, I'm sure that you want to stay in good graces so that you continue to get to work. And then it was really the amazing success of Batman Begins that let him start calling the shots. One
thing I will say, that another character in Insomnia is the oppressive daylight.
Yes.
And Pacino's inability to sleep. This is the movie that I watched. I prepped. Nolan calls it his underappreciated movie, and I totally see that. Right, it is underappreciated. I did not appreciate it enough. I remember watching it thinking, "Oh, well, that was not Memento. That didn't have a mind-blowing turn, and I was wanting a gimmick. And what I instead got was just a really good movie filled with good performances. But the way he uses the insomnia that is being suffered by Pacino, and I am someone who deals with insomnia, and I really, really understand it. It's pretty rough. And I have my young daughter's 8, deals with insomnia. It's a hard thing to watch someone else go through. Very difficult to watch Pacino and the exhaustion. He portrays that so well. This sunlight being oppressive and trying to figure out how to block that out. The landscape became its own character in the movie, and so just well done.
I'm glad you said that about the landscape. That was going to be the point I made, is that it didn't have Nolan's trademark story, but it did start to build that trademark Nolan-esqueness where the environment is very character. Mm-hmm. And in every one of his pictures, even some of the vastly different ones, where it is and how it's placed is done so well. And Nolan is amazing as at that. It's like locations and using camera angles to increase your understanding of the story.
Yes. So a question for you is that, in Alaska, and, a good little chunk of the year is spent in near daylight, a good chunk of the year is spent in near darkness. What do you think you could, from a mental health perspective, deal with better?
Darkness.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah,
I'm not saying neither would be ideal.
Sure.
And certainly both would be interesting as a novelty to try. But if I had to live with one for an extended period of time, I think that the darkness...
Yeah. I mean, you could say, well, you can get blackout curtains, you can put foil in windows, whatever.
Get a basement house.
Right, yeah. I mean, there are things that you could do to that, but I think I could cope with darkness more. And I don't know, maybe I'm completely wrong, but that's my gut reaction.
Yeah. Well, man, it is certainly a good and underrated film. And I would say if you watched it at the time and felt like, oh, man, I wanted Memento 2.0, right? And you didn't get it, go back and revisit it and appreciate it for what it is, which is a very well done, well acted film. Very tough to watch, a choice presented in a very clear way.
That's interesting.
You might really enjoy it.
Since I saw Batman Begins first, I did not go into Insomnia expecting another Memento because I'd already seen something else Chris Nolan had done. So that was not on my radar at all. I really enjoyed Insomnia. I thought it was a great film. And so I was not disappointed nor confused by the fact that it didn't have some kind of a twist ending. I was just learning about Chris Nolan as a director because I'd already seen Batman Begins.
So speaking of Batman Begins,
is that the next one?
That is the next one, 2005.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking back on this. At the time, I did not know that there was going to be a new Batman movie. I was kind of unplugged from pop culture a little bit. I was working a ton, establishing my career. And I just remember hearing there's a Batman movie. It's at the Palace, which was our second run theater at the time, so we could go for a couple bucks. And it's from the guy who did Memento. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, let's go check it out. And Mary and I, went and saw it. And really enjoyed it, right? But it was interesting to think now when a new Batman movie comes out, I'm like, oh, I'm all over it. And, I'm reading everything about it. And but there's something about that moment in time, little kid working like a madman. It didn't hook me in.
I was in the same boat. In 2005, we had 2 kids at that point, young, very young. And I don't even think I saw Begins in theaters. I think I saw it on home video, if I'm remembering right. But I was the exact same way. That is my biggest hole of pop culture is the early 2000s. Yeah. I just have no clue what happened during that time.
You're wasting your time with family and work.
Exactly. Which is probably why I didn't see Memento or Insomnia until I finally saw Begins. But yeah, it was a very weird time for me too. But I saw Batman Begins and in my show notes, I wrote this thought down, and I want to see if you agree with me or if I'm forgetting something. But I believe Batman Begins is the first comic book movie of any character that was taken seriously. Would you agree with that?
Well, boy, that's interesting. I recall the Spider-Man movies. Maybe serious is the key word there that I'm not thinking about right. I do remember Batman '89 having some degree of seriousness because Nicholson, right? It had some gravitas.
It had some gravitas, but I don't think it had serious. And I love '89. Don't get me wrong, but it's still a comic book movie. It's still, whereas Batman Begins, the whole premise that Nolan is bringing to it is, what if somebody did this
in the real world, grounded?
Yes.
What would they have to? What would it look like? What kind of mental state would they have to be in? That's a really interesting question. So, I think that Nolan obviously took it seriously, which maybe that's all that needed to be done in order for him to frame up this great film. I don't know about, I'm having trouble remembering how the rest of the world took it because I was unplugged. But I know for me, it was like, wow, I really enjoyed this. And I hope they make another one. And I love the end. Like, there's a guy who's knocking over banks. He leaves this calling card.
Yeah.
I'll look into it, or I'll look into it, or however he does that voice. But it was just so well done. And to me, I knew that it was something special. And maybe this ties into that series when early in the film, when he's in the prison, the Bhutanese prison, I can't say it. And they said, we're separating you from them for your protection. He goes, I don't need protection. No, protection for them. Yeah. And there was something different about this. It was going to take itself seriously, if nothing else. And it had great villains, Roz, Scarecrow, and Rutger Hauer as the corporate villain. What a great bit of casting. Yes. You got just a little bit of fantastic Gotham. There was that train through the city, so it wasn't totally, real world grounded, but enough. You had a Batmobile that was a serious vehicular weapon, right? And that could do some damage and was practical. The whole thing just worked. You had an Alfred that was Alfred, right?
Yeah.
And I still kind of back and forth on whether or not they're my absolute favorite Alfreds that do like Jeremy Irons an awful lot. But I think that Kane is probably the best.
The only gripe I'll give, and it's a minor gripe, is it's hard not to just see Michael Caine because he's he's
Michael Caine,
right?
He's a character in and of itself.
He's such a venerated actor,
yes.
That it's hard to be like, oh, Butler, really? But his performance is fantastic, and it's absolutely wonderful. And your comment about Gotham is spot on because very much intentionally, Nolan was like, I want this to look like Chicago, and they shot a lot of it in Chicago. And it does look a lot like Chicago. And for every other filmmaker, and for even the comic book, Gotham is always this cathedral town. I mean, it doesn't exist anywhere. People are like, oh, it's New York. No, it isn't. It's not New York. It is a very unique flavor that I think Tim Burton nailed very, very well.
Sure.
And then Nolan comes in, and again, and I'll stop repeating myself about how he uses location and sets and that kind of stuff, but he brings Gotham to earth for the first time in cinema. And I think that's significant as well to the overall flavor of it. More so maybe to the sequels than Batman Begins, but that grounds it for me in such a new way that no other Batman series has done since.
Well, I love it. Nolan had some decent action scenes. I think that he was still figuring out how to film action, but he had some of the cool ninja stealth stuff. He had a great take on a comic book outfit, like a bat costume, a cool cowl, hiding the, how do you buy these? How do you make them? Well, you buy 10,000 of them. And then what happens when, when they don't work right? Well, you order another 10,000 more. That's the only way. That's how you just deal with it.
Right.
It worked. And I think it made, it just felt like you had a serious director, you had a serious cast, and you had an audience who was loving it, that it changed the relationship with comic book movies. And I think it opened everything that was going to come after it. I think started because Batman Begins was handled the way that it was, and it wasn't just another goofy, silly movie. Remember, the Batman movie just before this was Batman and Robin with Clooney and O'Donnell and ridiculousness, and Nolan legitimized that type of film, and for better or worse, right?
Yeah, and I would say for better.
Oh, I agree.
And what blows me away is Warner learned all the wrong lessons going forward. Once they were like, okay, Nolan has set up this incredible world with his Batman trilogy. We're going to go in, we're going to expand the DC universe. It's like you missed every point that Christopher Nolan was making, in his films, and you went the other direction. And that baffles me. I don't understand that to this day.
Yeah, wasn't he saying go hire James Gunn and make it all goofy and ridiculous?
That's not what.
No, okay.
No, you missed the message.
Misunderstood. Yeah.
You and Warner Brothers, Dave.
Hire Zack Snyder and have Batman beat everyone to death, right?
No, that's not the message.
Yeah. Well, I agree to disagree.
Okay.
And my Batman will kill you.
My Batman will outact your Batman.
And so I think that I want to talk more about Batman.
Sure.
We've got 2 more movies.
Yes, we do.
And I think that
we can move on.
I think so the next one, I love this movie. 2006, The Prestige. He directed it. He wrote it. It is just... You got Wolverine, you had Batman, you had magic, and David Bowie as Tesla.
Yeah.
And on the other end of that comes out The Prestige.
Yeah.
And it is so clever. It is so smart and well done. It fits together so well. It's got an internal logic that is just bulletproof. Every performance is great. Whatever frustration you're feeling with Christian Bale's character, you understand why he behaved the way he did at the end when you realize it was, 2 different people.
Yes.
I did not see that coming.
Me
I had
either.
all kinds of like what is going, all kinds of questions, and I don't know anybody who guessed that. I know a couple people that might have claimed to it, but they didn't. They
lying.
Absolutely didn't. They were lying. One thing I will say about this, first of all, I read this. It took Nolan 5 years to write this script, which the care that goes into it. But it came out at the same summer as another similarly themed film, which was Edward Norton's The Illusionist.
Yes.
Twin movies is what that's called.
Yep.
The Illusionist is a terrible movie. And what frustrated me was I didn't know people, interestingly enough, the people who, Memento, that we talked about, that they loved The Illusionist. And they thought that it was great, and The Prestige was just stupid and slow and didn't make any sense. But yet they liked the CGI fest of Edward Norton, and it really made me angry. I burned their house down.
That's extreme.
It was
and now
extreme.
that you've admitted that,
they
on the
weren't
podcast.
home. Their pets were. I feel bad about that. No,
you should.
But they did. To me, that was kind of a litmus test. Like, I'm going to set these 2 movies that are
Which one do you like?
kind of similar, and you tell me, your tastes, right? The Prestige is just.
Yeah.
It outclasses it at every level.
So I love The Prestige too. It was a fantastic film. Amazing performances, amazing storytelling, amazing filmmaking. And this is what I came out of The Prestige with the knowledge of, the appreciation of, and Nolan has not disappointed me since. Nolan trusts his audience. Yep. And you cannot say that about very many people making movies, writing books, doing anything in the arts. So many people think the audience is a bunch of idiots and have to be spoon-fed everything. And Nolan does not believe that. He does not hold to that idea. And The Prestige was the first Nolan movie that I watched it, and that thought occurred to me. It was like, this guy says, I'm going to take you on for a ride. You're smart enough to get this, and just go with me. And, as you talked about, especially Bale's character, you're watching it for the first time, and you're like, something's not adding up here. This is, I don't understand this. I'm not sure about this. And in different hands, that would fall apart.
Yeah.
And you would have people say, this movie makes no sense. I've lost it. I'm not interested, blah, 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 blah. But Nolan crafts it perfectly. You get that delivery of the final piece of information that makes the whole thing just perfectly fall into place. And the fact that here is a filmmaker that says, I'm going to trust my audience to follow with me. And then the people pushing, piles of cash to allow him to make these films are saying, yep, we trust you. It's going to work out. I think The Prestige is when he got that Nolan-ness about himself, and it was from the success of Batman Begins, but The Prestige is where kind of Nolan lands, that, and now he is the director that we're talking about.
It's such a well-crafted movie in every sense, and you root for for Bale's character. You are disgusted by Jackman's character.
Yep.
You feel all these weird conflicting emotions about why is he mistreating his wife, and then it all becomes so clear in an indie that no one saw coming. And like I said, if they told you that, I think they were fibbing, or they convinced themselves. But yeah, no one saw that. Wonderful, and we listen. Bowie was fantastic.
Yeah, as
Tesla.
Yeah.
And I read that that Nolan had offered it to Bowie, and Bowie wasn't interested. And then Nolan went and he got a meeting with him in person, and talked to him about how he was the only person he thought could do this, and then Bowie agreed.
And Nolan has a knack of really smart casting choices.
Mm-hmm.
And even when he casts actors that I'm not particularly fond of, he's the only director where I'm like, okay, I'm going to assume that he knows what he's doing, and he's not failed me yet. Which is not to say I wasn't thrilled that David Bowie was in The Prestige, but it just that certainty that Christopher Nolan has. Because 9 out of 10 directors, when Bowie was like, thank you, but no, they would have been like, okay, who's next? Bill Murray, let's get him in here.
Sure.
But the fact that Nolan was like, this is the way it's got to be, and I'm going to fight for it. I really respect that from Nolan.
So then, Prestige, right? And I'm trying to remember. I think I saw it at the second run theater.
I did see it in theater. I don't remember where.
Yeah, which is fine, right? Things went to the second run pretty quick, and it saved us a ton of money.
Yeah.
So. But this next movie, you can bet I did not wait for the second run theater. Opening night, midnight show.
Yes.
People did not know what they were in for with The Dark Knight.
My
And
goodness.
I go back and I think about it, and I'm like, I would love to be able to relive that. Not just sit there in the theater and watch it again, but go into it blank.
Yeah.
And not really know what is coming, and just that feeling of, I watched something that changed cinema.
Yeah.
Because as much as I think Batman Begins made it serious, The Dark Knight elevated it, and not just the Nolan fans were convinced, the whole world was convinced that comic books could be a viable art form in the right hands, the right material, and done in an adult way, right? And I think, to me, when I think of The Dark Knight, it's Heat with Batman and Joker, right?
That's
it's that
perfect.
kind of, it's that kind of serious crime movie, and with great performances. I mean, really, every bit of casting, from the smallest part to the biggest part. I would say that the recast of Rachel, Maggie Gyllenhaal, was the weakest part of that movie, and I understand that Katie Holmes did not want to come back.
Yeah.
And I guess supposedly it has something to do with Tom Cruise and schedules, and who knows.
Yeah.
But it was okay. She was fine. I think Katie Holmes is a better actress, but it did fine. And really, honestly, you had Heath Ledger to watch.
Jeez.
And how you couldn't take your eyes off of that. You were horrified and mesmerized. He was the train wreck on the screen that was just outstanding.
So that's a better example of what I was talking about than David Bowie and Prestige. When it was announced that Nolan's doing the next Batman, no surprise, Heath Ledger as the Joker. It's like the guy from A Knight's Tale.
Right.
And it was like Michael Keaton all over again. And everybody was like, that's insane. Worst casting choice I've ever heard in my life. This is going to be a disaster. And I mean, it is one of the best performances ever.
It is.
And I could wax eloquently about it for hours, but I'll spare everyone that. And I'll just say it is one of the best performances ever. Collectively, when he passed away, the world should have just been like, we're not going to touch the Joker again for at least 40 years.
Right.
Because nobody can live up to it.
Well, and Jared Leto could do it.
Oh, boy. Anyway, so so The Dark Knight is, I mean, it's everything that you said. It was, what year was it? Do you have that in your notes?
2008.
2008. Okay.
Yep.
So 2008, in my life, I am working every free moment of my time to try to become a professional filmmaker. And I'm working in independent film, and I'm getting paid from corporate film work. And so, me and Nolan, we're
very similar.
Simpatico, just like that, except he made it and I didn't. So there was that tiny
and you too,
difference.
You were getting Michael Caine to be in all your corporate films.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were pals.
He was a fixture.
So the whole thing with Dark Knight about shooting some of it on IMAX, like that was a very crystallized moment in my eyes, because here I am, this young kid, immersed in cinema, immersed in the world of filmmaking, trying to achieve that on my own, and I hear this guy is shooting IMAX. I understand like the budget implications of that, what that means, why that's difficult, and so me going into it, not only could I not wait to see the sequel to Batman Begins, I was like, oh, Heath Ledger, that's going to suck. I'm just going to have to deal with that. But I want to see how IMAX, I want to see what that does to the film.
Right.
And then now, in 2023, I appreciate it more than I did then, because honestly, 2 seconds into The Dark Knight, I'm forgetting all about how it's shot or why or what it's on. And I'm just immersed. That bank heist scene in the beginning is so good. It's so well structured, it's micro Nolan, you don't know what's going on. You're not sure who these people are. There's some connection to the Joker, but you don't know what it is. And then you get the payoff from just that one little scene. And and you're just,
and even the casting of that scene, with William Fincher is the mob bank manager, and it's just the details are there and so brilliant, and so I remember seeing that at the Midnight Movie. We did not see it in IMAX that time. I did go see it in IMAX later, so I got to see the cool transition. But just believing it was like 3 a.m, and like just I wasn't tired.
No.
It captured something that I had not felt since like going to see The Phantom Menace in the theater, right? But none of the disappointment. I'm talking about that sort of sense that I want to talk about this movie.
Right.
But it was better than my expectations.
Yes, it's so good.
And I mean, it just it made comic book movies. Right after that, you got Iron Man, I believe, right? 2008 was when Iron Man came out. A few months later, I believe. Yep. And Iron Man's great. I love Iron Man. Good, Robert Downey Jr., great, entertaining film, but
worlds apart.
In The Dark Knight, I think that the Dark Knight was every bit as impactful on what Marvel has done and the success that they've had as that first Iron Man movie was. Because it said, look, you can make high art in this, and you just got to work really hard. Now, Marvel's never achieved anything even close to that.
No, and I don't think they wanted to. But unlike Warner Brothers, which we were talking about earlier, Marvel looked at The Dark Knight and said, I see what you did. That's not me, but I'm going to cherry pick what works. And I'm going to combine that with the high special effects, with the high engagement, with the high energy, with the comedy. And that, to me, that's what made the what do they call it? The first phase?
Phase one.
Phase one. To me, that's what made phase one such a success, is they had Iron Man, where they had some good ingredients. And I don't think you can say Iron Man was influenced by Dark Knight. I think they were too close to each other.
No, but I mean the rest of the MCU was influenced by Dark Knight.
Yes, but I think Iron Man, Favreau had some really smart ideas in how he was going to approach it. I think he delivered a successful movie, but then they said, okay, let's make it even more. Let's expand this and go into what eventually became Phase One, and it's great. I mean, I can't complain about any of Phase One Marvel. I can complain about later phases, but that's a different show.
And, you know, the city, again, was a character. Gotham is Chicago. Mm-hmm. And the fantasticness was stripped away.
Yeah, more so. That's what I was going to say. More so than Batman Begins.
Yes.
It's even more of just a city.
Yes.
Than it was in Batman Begins. And then, and I think he consciously did that because you had more fantasy in the Joker and in Two-Face. And
Yeah.
I think he kind of wanted to match that a little bit and kind of balance that a little bit more than, whereas in Batman Begins, your villains were more believable. And so then you could be a little more fantastic in the city. That's my thought. I don't know if that's really what he was thinking.
I never thought about it like that. That's a really interesting way to think about it. I always kind of thought that maybe it was just Nolan saying, yeah, I'm going to redraw the rules of engagement here because I want it to be more grounded, and you're going to do whatever I say because I'm Christopher Nolan.
Yeah. You're going to flip a freaking truck.
Yes.
Because I'm Christopher Nolan.
And then you got the Bat Pod.
Yes.
Which is just so cool,
yes.
right? The Tumbler was awesome, and then now we're going to have a motorcycle explode out of that. It's even cooler. But yeah, no, it was first comic book movie to hit $1 billion in the box office. A big surveillance society commentary through line through that, especially at the end when, you know, the machine that he built that allows him to see throughout the city, and Fox is like, as long as this machine's here, I won't be, and type in your name. And
yeah, and it's interesting that Batman's not the hero in that aspect of it. You know, he's like, I'm going to use the machine. That's what I got to do. And it was Lucius that says this isn't right. And even though Batman agreed and had set up that process, Batman was still perfectly willing to use it.
Sure. Wow. Yeah, really everything. And that scene in we talked about it ad nauseum, but that scene in the police station.
Oh, the interrogation.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
And you know, I don't want to go off and just have a whole Batman conversation here, but the new Batman, I think, rips off The Dark Knight beat by beat, and you get a watered down, less interesting version. And I think now it's kind of cool to hate on Nolan, like, oh yeah, because everyone, like, the internet culture is just vile.
Yes.
And well, now everybody's like, oh yeah, well, the Batman is great and The Dark Knight stinks, and you know, it's irrational, and yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I hate the internet. Thanks for joining our podcast that we publish on the internet. So from there,
we looked into vinyl, but it just wasn't.
The distribution costs several $100 a pressing, and I don't even own a record player. Digital versus physical. Hello.
Okay. All right. So
I guess I could download an album. Never mind.
Yeah. The internet's good for some things, Dave.
Nolan's next film.
Yes.
And we'll come back to Batman.
Sure we will.
Because I believe there's another one on the list. I don't know if you're familiar with that. 2010.
Yep.
Inception.
Yes.
And people just went nuts over this movie. I mean,
it was a good movie.
It's a good movie. You had Leo. You got cities folding in on each other. You had high concept. You had a great cast.
Yes,
you know, not just Leo, but you again have Michael Caine. You've got Tom Hardy. You know, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Yeah,
you're right the first time.
Yeah. You got Tom Berenger. You got Ken Watanabe. You've got you've got Cillian Murphy. They're planting the memory.
And the Cillian Murphy's father.
Yes,
I love that actor.
Pete Postlethwaite.
Yes,
I don't have that written down. I had to remember.
Good job.
The guy with the Sharpie face.
Yes,
it's like a little Sharpie dog, like Tommy Lee Jones.
Fantastic.
Yes,
good job remembering his name. Fantastic actor. I love him.
Passed away a few years back. I believe.
Did.
Yeah. No, that's what's interesting. First of all, it's a good movie. It's not one that I've revisited much. It was one that I felt like once I saw it, I kind of saw it. I will say that the whole wife subplot and her showing up, I found that more of a distraction than I did find it was adding anything to it. I felt like, I don't know, one of the few rare things where like, I don't know if no one's making the right choice here, but
well, to that I would say you need to revisit it again.
Maybe I should. And it was one of, if I had time, I was going to watch it. I ran out of time, but I will also say that the best action scene Nolan has ever done, which is the Bond homage, the ski scene at the end, just
I disagree. I mean, it's a fantastic action scene. My favorite Nolan action scene is still to come.
Okay.
But fair point.
One thing I will say, the soundtrack's pretty forgettable. Again, for Nolan and Zimmer, which magic, but I can't remember a single tune.
It's like Tenet soundtrack where it has a purpose and it plays that purpose well in the sense of the film. But you're not I'm gonna pop in the Inception soundtrack. You're not gonna do that.
Well, yeah, that's not one I rewatch much. The ending. Do you think he was reunited with his kids?
Yes,
I do too. I would hope that he is.
Now, do you have a reason you think that, or do you just hope?
I probably did have a reason at one point, something about the narrative structure. Like, if he's on the screen, I can't remember.
So my take, I
had a reason.
Yeah, my take is every time you see the kids prior to that last scene, you never see their faces. And then in the last scene, you see their faces.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's good, yeah.
Now, Inception is one I've rewatched quite a lot. I'm a really big fan of this movie. I like the way it folds in on itself. I like the logic. And the fact that there is logic, and it's very well structured, and I don't think there's a plot hole in the movie. I mean, people can be like, I didn't understand. It's like, well, keep watching. It's there. It's all there on the screen. There was not anything that Nolan did where he's like, oh crap, well, I need this to work, so it's going to work. It all makes logical sense in the function of the film, which is what I appreciate of it beyond just about anything else. But I think it's a great movie. It's a great story. It's very well acted, very well put together. Very much a Nolan film. Nobody else is going to make Inception.
No, it is a Nolan film. He worked on the script for like 10
years. Yeah,
crazy amount of care that goes into it.
And he made a comment once where he's like, "What finally made it finishable, if that's not a word, but finally made him able to complete the script, is when he came up with the idea of a heist story." And when he had the trappings of heist, where you have the opportunity to give a lot of exposition, he's like, that's when I was able to finish the script. And I think that's fantastic. That at its core, it's a heist movie. I love that.
And also, I mentioned this earlier, as someone who deals with insomnia, I want one of those sleep rigs that I can just sit down and whatever they're doing, put it in my veins, and then I'm out. And
then I have to kick your chair out from under you to wake you up.
That's fine. That's fine. I can live with that.
All right.
Mary can just kick me. And I love everyone in the cast. I love Leo. I think he's just a great actor. Mm-hmm. I think maybe I needed a break because I'd seen it a couple times in the theaters and a couple times after that, and then I went years without watching it, kind of burned myself out. It's probably one that if I sit down and watched it again, I could recapture the appreciation. But sometimes you just watch it too much, too
I get that
tight of a period of time. But anything else about Inception?
I think we've covered it.
It's one of the. I'm sure. I think if you go on the IMDb top 100, I think it's like in the top 10, maybe. I think it's up there. I tend not to put too much stock in that because
me either.
Yeah. But the next movie, I remember very, very well going and seeing The Dark Knight Rises in 2012 at the IMAX in Branson, which at the time when it was still a film IMAX theater. Now it's the laser, whatever. Yeah. People think that sounds great, but no, I wish it was a 70 millimeter IMAX. I really love The Dark Knight Rises, and I get there are some flaws, and that it gets kind of picked apart by some people. I think that it's a better film than Batman Begins. It's not better than The Dark Knight, but I love Gotham City in a lockdown state. I love a compromised Jim Gordon and the real consequences, the weight of the actions of The Dark Knight coming back. I think Tom Hardy is Bane as a terrorist and a fanatic. A fantastic performance. I do think that the evoking, like the Dark Knight evoked surveillance culture, surveillance society, evoking the Occupy Wall Street movement, and throwing the wealthy out of their homes and installing kangaroo courts and all that. Weaving in the Black Rock prison and the Dent Act, just well done. Pittsburgh stands in for Gotham instead of Chicago, which interesting. I've wondered if that's a style choice or if that was just a matter of convenience where they were filming.
Yeah, I don't know.
Pittsburgh, it works, right? Big industrial city. You got the bridges. And having been to Pittsburgh, I don't know if you've ever been there.
I have.
It's it's kind of a cool, neat industrial town, and it worked. When I was there, they were not under terrorist attack by a comic book villain, which was good. It happened the week before. I just missed it.
Oof, lucky you.
And I love Catwoman in the film. I thought her as a cat burglar, it worked, right?
Yeah.
And great casting. She had a cool outfit. The whole her seeking the identity wipe reset thing was a neat little MacGuffin that wasn't a MacGuffin. Yeah. I think that it is a film that gets a little bit of underrated, a little bit of crap. And I think there's a few things that it did wrong, right? I did not like at the end Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character being Robin.
You didn't?
I thought that was kind of silly, especially since Robin was not a person's name in the comic books. He was
sure.
I think the idea of him taking up and carrying the bat mantle is kind of a neat one, but that one little detail just.
It didn't bother me because I knew they weren't going to do a fourth one.
Right. Never going to happen.
And so it was just kind of like a little, I see what you did there. So it didn't really bother me. I mean, Dark Knight Rises is a great film. I will admit to being a little disappointed just because the bar was so high with Dark Knight. And I saw Rises and I was like, well, that's good, but of course it's not as good as Dark Knight.
How do you follow that, though?
Exactly. And the fact that Nolan did well speaks to him. The things I did like about the movie, I love the flashbacks to the prison where Bane as a child is and then how that twists at the very end,
it's
and you realize
Bane
it's not Bane. Yeah, and to do that cinematically, very difficult.
Yeah, no, I didn't see that coming.
Yes.
I don't. If anyone tells you saw it coming again. They didn't.
Exactly. So, I mean, that was fantastic. As somebody who grew up through the Nightfall comic book, I'm going to call it a fiasco.
Yeah.
Because I was not a fan of how DC handled that.
And we had the Vengeance of Bane one shot that introduced Bane. We were very familiar with who Bane was as a character.
So, and I was not a fan of that whole period of Batman comics. And so then for Nolan to go and to pick that character... he did it extremely well.
Yep.
And it's really interesting to me because not only did he, I mean, you could argue that it's a very faithful following of Nightfall in certain respects.
In some ways, sure.
But then to do a story I hated so much, and for me to be like, oh, okay, if it's like this, I like it. I think that speaks well to his talent as a storyteller. Yeah. So it's not the Dark Knight, but I like it.
It's a difficult comparison. I really do enjoy it. It's one I think I've maybe seen it more than the Dark Knight for whatever reason, and mostly my son absolutely loves it. So if he's watching it, I watch it with him, and he loves the Dark Knight. Don't get me wrong, but he really likes the Dark Knight Rises. So I think that's just been something we've watched together. I love the whole Wall Street. Or whatever, it's not Wall Street, but the stockbroker floor scene and Bane's brutality and the dialogue and
the stadium
chase.
Scene is amazing.
The stadium
too.
scene, yes, and it's all so well done. But no, you're right. I mean, to get that character right, it's been so easy to end up with a Batman and Robin professional wrestler type guy. The professional wrestler who's playing Bane, absolutely ridiculous. You could have ended up with something like that, but instead he was played as a terrifying, religious zealot. Who is a terrorist, and so well done. Tom Hardy just sold it, and he sold it without ever seeing his face.
Tom Hardy's amazing.
Yes, and in a few minutes we'll talk about another performance he sells that ever actually really seeing his face.
Yes.
Well, we'll say this though. This is an area where I'm going to give Nolan some technical criticism. and I'll mention this in a few other films, his sound mixes, I understand why he's doing it. He's wrong, because if you can't understand the words, that becomes a barrier and it's inaccessible, and that's not an artistic choice. I think that's a mistake, and I think that his dialogue mixing started to become a problem here. And I think that he defends his choices around that, but I don't think it's defensible, because if people in the audience cannot hear, or they don't have the equipment at home to hear it, then they're not enjoying it. And you're failing as a filmmaker by prioritizing what you think is the right thing over your audience being able to experience your work. I think that's a failure on Nolan's part.
It is a very strange hill to die on.
It is.
And I'd love to have a conversation with him about it. And I'm just saying this now. Chris Nolan, you're invited on the podcast.
Come on,
anytime you
He's
want.
middle-aged.
Yeah, sure.
Three middle-aged guys.
We could figure a lot of stuff out.
Imagine
with Chris Nolan with us.
The twist ending.
They weren't middle-aged at all. No. So I'd love to have a conversation with him about it. It is a strange sort of thing. And I will have more to say about it in a future movie that we discuss.
All right. Let's talk about the next film, 2014. Our daughter, not yours and my daughter, but my wife and I's third child had just been born. And I was hoping Mary could wait to have the baby until after Interstellar had came out, because I wanted to see it in the theater.
She didn't?
She did not. She insisted on having the baby when she did. I did go see it with my son and nephew. We saw Interstellar at a midnight show at a local theater that broke out their 35 millimeter projector for a one-time show. And they couldn't figure out how to get it running. And we were waiting and waiting. Finally, they got it going, because they hadn't had it out in years. They had to bring someone back that knew how to operate it. And we got to watch, we didn't get to see it in 70 millimeter, but we got to watch it in 35 millimeter on film. The build-up for Interstellar was just, it was so mysterious. It looked incredible. Every trailer looked fantastic, but also okay, you're getting prepared for a really neat, immersive, massive in scope science fiction film, but that's all you knew, right?
Yeah.
Interstellar is my favorite movie ever made.
Is it really?
I absolutely love it. I saw it at least 4 times in the theater.
Wow.
It's the first 4K movie I ever owned. I bought it so many times digitally because I wanted to get it early, and at the time it was a little bit more fractured to buy it, but I bought that movie I don't know how many times.
Yeah.
I love it. It is, like I said, the greatest movie ever made, the greatest Nolan film. The effects were incredible. The science was awesome. I read the book by Kip Thorne, The Science of Interstellar. I read the Interstellar novelization.
Yeah.
When's the last time anybody read a novelization of a movie, right? And I did, because I wanted to know there was more in it, and I wanted just a little tiny bit more.
Sure.
Man, I loved everything about it.
It's a great movie. And this is me being stupid. The trailers didn't do it for me. I did not go see it in the theater.
Whoa!
I know.
Podcast is over. Get out.
Listen, I'm admitting a mistake here. Okay. I saw it when it came out on DVD, and was obviously blown away. It's a great film. The twist is, it's twistier maybe than some of Nolan's other films, but when it happens and when you figure out what's going on, you're just it's one of the more mind-blowing of Nolan's twists.
Sure.
I think that's what I'm trying to say. But I love it. And again, with the casting, if you would have told me I'm going to put Matthew McConaughey in a space movie, I would have been like, you're crazy. But he's phenomenal in it. Everybody's phenomenal in it. I love the interweaving of the Dust Bowl documentary footage.
Yes.
I was so smart, so unique.
Yep.
And talk about bringing gravitas to this event that happens in the story of the movie. It's a great movie. It is not my favorite Nolan film, but I sure think highly of it, and I sure wish I'd seen it in the theaters, especially on film. That would have been amazing.
Man, I do love it. It's interesting, though, you mentioned McConaughey in a space movie. He was in, one of his early roles was Contact, which was the Carl Sagan movie.
Also a very good movie.
It's okay. It's fine. I don't love it as much as everyone. It's fine.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, Carl Sagan, when he was writing the novel, he needed some help with a device for interstellar travel, and Dr. Kip Thorne helped him.
Oh, really?
Kip Thorne helped him with wormholes. Kip Thorne also was a science advisor on Interstellar. So there's a connection there.
Interesting.
But I McConaughey as the engineer, the pilot, is Coop.
I love the robot in the movie.
Oh,
too.
yeah, the robots. And the practical effects were, that was a guy wearing a robot kind of sort of puppet outfit,
right.
Controlling it.
And when Nolan made them all go into space.
TARS Tom Cruise actually flew up to space in Tom Cruise's spaceship.
Yes.
A little known fact. Interstellar is based on a true story. It's funny, though. Are you familiar with the Phil Plait, the bad astronomy in movies guy?
No.
So Phil Plait is a astronomer, and he got started in the early aughts writing dissections of science fiction movies and bad astronomy in science fiction movies and stuff like, hey, here's what is silly about Star Wars.
Right.
Well, he went and saw Interstellar and wrote a scathing, this is impossible, this is ridiculous, and broke it down. And then Kip Thorne was made aware of it, and Kip Thorne sent him a copy of the book, The Science of Interstellar, and Phil Plait had to kind of just retract his entire... He basically said, I still don't like the movie, but I was totally wrong about the science. And it kind of showed that he doesn't know as much, that his astronomy, more than me, sure, but his astronomy had limits, and that he dismissed without thinking critically about things like gentle singularities and spinning black holes and the effects of time dilation. He didn't think very hard about those things. It's kind of, Kip Thorne kind of schooled him.
Well, that's why you got to be careful about recording stuff and posting it on the internet.
On the internet, it's a bad idea. It's why I have a policy. Nothing goes on the internet.
Yeah. Moving on.
Yeah. But I like these microphones you set in front of us. They're really neat. But you may hear that joke in an upcoming commercial for a certain website or podcast. So I really, I think that Interstellar is Nolan at the height of his powers.
Okay.
I'm going to go on for hours about this. No, I will say this. The soundtrack. The best soundtrack to any film ever. I love... And
it's Zimmer, right?
It is Zimmer, and it is just... You got pipe organs, you got other things. If I can't sleep, I'll toss the Interstellar soundtrack on, start to finish. You got a little bit of Matt Damon in there as the evil Dr. Man, the worst of mankind, clumsy, but it works. And I would love a set of prequels about the Lazarus Mission. There was a prequel comic book about Dr. Man that Nolan wrote, and
I didn't know that.
Digitally, it was available digitally. It's okay, it's fine. I would love a whole set of. I'm giving all these ideas. Nolan, please, yes. I will buy them. You have a customer. Again, though, I'm going to two things, right? Sound mix is a problem here. A lot of times they're on the spaceship. The sounds of the spaceship drowned out, making the dialogue very difficult to understand, and that serves no purpose when the audience can't understand the words that are being spoken. Especially when you consider there are people who are hard of hearing that struggle. Sure.
Did you feel that way even seeing it in the theaters?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yes, I did. I don't know if I mentioned this. I saw it 4 times.
You did, yeah. But I didn't know if you had if you consciously thought in the theaters this sound mix is a problem.
No, I did.
Okay.
What did he just say there? He mumbled something, but this clanging of that ship that they're on. And I've got a decent sound system. It's not great, right? I have a sound bar that it's an Atmos-enabled sound bar, and it's got dialogue enhancement. Polk has a decent dialogue enhancement mode, and even with that, like all the way maxed out, Interstellar can be tough. And I know the movie very well, so I've got it all memorized. But man, somebody who's hard of hearing, it's an interesting hill to die on. I think I think if I had 10 minutes with him, I think I could get him to see my perspective on it.
Yeah, well, he's welcome anytime.
Anytime, but this ties into something though. So it's something we're going to talk about in just a moment. In this film, remember this: we get help from our future selves, the fifth dimension beings, our future selves. Yep. They're helping us.
Yep.
In a minute, we're going to talk about an inversion of that scenario. What? The next film. Are you ready to go on?
I'm very ready to go
I want to talk more about Interstellar.
Okay.
No, the next film. 2017. I did not see this movie in the theaters.
I didn't either.
Dunkirk. And I have only watched it once. It is my least favorite Nolan movie. Mm-hmm. And that is not a judgment on the quality. It comes down to the fact that the movie makes me nervous. And like I need to be smoking cigarettes and pacing. It is a tense and extremely difficult movie to watch. When the destroyer is sunk and the men drowned and all of the different things that are going on, Dunkirk is a hard film to watch.
It is. It is a masterpiece. It is not my least favorite Chris Nolan movie. It's up there. I have a hard time ranking them. I'll tell you what my favorite one is when we're finished with the list. But I like Dunkirk a lot. From the opening shot of the flyers raining down on the soldiers as they're walking through, it's just pure cinema. And that's one thing I like about Chris Nolan. There are very, very, very few directors that can create what I call pure cinema, which means there is no other way than a movie screen that this movie could be told, that this story could be told. And I think Dunkirk falls into that category. It's amazing. It is a story in history that I had not heard before going to see Dunkirk. And again,
I heard the name, right?
Sure,
I knew,
sure.
It was a thing, and it was an evacuation. That was it.
Yeah. No, and I made a comment on an earlier podcast where I said, for whatever reason, every time I hear what the next Christopher Nolan movie is, I'm unimpressed, and then when I see it, I'm blown away. And that totally fit Dunkirk for me. It was like, oh, he's doing a war picture. Not interested. I don't care why. And then I saw it, and I'm blown away by it. It's a fantastic movie. If I'm going to give it a criticism, it's a silly criticism. It is the reveal of Tom Hardy. It's a little bit like, oh, it's Tom Hardy, it took me out of the movie.
Really?
Yeah, it did a little bit. But from a visual standpoint, it is, I think, the greatest war movie ever made. I'm gonna say I like it more than Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, I can't go there for many reasons, but I do feel like Private Ryan is actually a better war movie, and it's a more relatable story. I think that Dunkirk is certainly technically incredible, right? And also the fact that you had these three, sort of concurrent stories, but on different scales of time. That was a very neat innovation.
Yeah.
To Hardy, I could have watched the whole movie, could have just been Hardy sitting in the plane, right? It was such well done.
Yeah.
The whole thing was so perfectly framed and shot, and technically just so interesting. And Tom Hardy is a great actor. Again, really like we talked about with Bane, he can emote and express without even seeing his face.
Yeah.
And you had the whole, he's trying to keep track of how much gas he's used and the different tricks he's using. Really a difficult thing to get across in any medium, right? Unless he's saying, hey guys, I cannot see my gas thing, so I'm going to put this here, guys. And it would be that understandable because Nolan's sound mix is not great. But short of doing that, right? Nolan came up with a great way to I'm going to serve this up and make sure everybody understands and can gin up that tension. And he got, the tension was just so high that I couldn't enjoy the movie.
Yeah, I can understand that. I love it. I think it's gorgeous. I've seen it a handful of times. And Dunkirk was the point where I'm like, okay, whatever Nolan does, it's going to be great. He proved himself to me, because I was really not interested when that movie was announced, and then when I saw it, I was still blown away.
Well, I at some point I'm going to try it again. I think
you should.
I maybe take a Xanax before.
Well, I think since you've seen it, I think a lot of the anxiety will be lessened, because how it's going to resolve. And so it'll be okay.
What's interesting, Harry Styles is in it, his big screen.
Again, casting people that you never, you hear it and you think, what? And then completely delivers in the movie.
Yeah, he delivers. He's not, when you have someone like that, sometimes the best thing you can say is they're not a distraction. Mm-hmm. He's totally not a distraction. Yeah. He's a quality actor,
he's
right?
Good in that movie.
So
we're about to run into another one of those casting decisions in the next film.
Are we?
Yes.
Okay.
I can't stand Robert Pattinson.
Well, I like him because of this next film.
Yes.
Tenet.
It's
like, oh, he can act.
Yeah.
And all he needed was good material.
But again, I hear Chris Nolan cast Robert Pattinson. I'm thinking, what in the world?
Shiny vampire?
He's so good in Tenet.
Yeah.
He's so good. Anyway.
So 2020.
Yes. The year of COVID.
The year of COVID, right? And
which means
Nolan
I did not see this in theaters.
I did go see it in theaters. Yeah. Nolan's going to reopen the theaters, right? Yeah. That's kind of what his mission was. I want to get people back in. He loves the cinema. He wants people in theaters, and it was pre-vaccine, and everyone has to make their own risk assessment. Yeah. And we decided to go see Tenet. Mary hates this movie.
Okay.
I love this movie.
I do too.
And we went, and it was fine. We didn't get sick. I got COVID a few months later. Somebody brought it into the house. But that person didn't like Tenet, by the way. So my younger sister. So, but I remember watching the trailers and being like, I have absolutely no idea what this movie's about.
Exactly.
I know it's got some sort of time. Playing with time, right? But I don't know anything else. I had some guesses. Those guesses were wrong. I thought there might be some sort of localized time rewinding or something, because you've seen things going forward and backwards. This, though, interestingly enough, I think that this might have been the first Nolan movie that it was cool to dislike. Because I think some people it didn't work for them. It was a little complicated. And it was one that didn't perfectly fit together. I think that unlike most of his movies that are bulletproof, I think that this one was a little slightly less than bulletproof. He said himself he wasn't going for scientific accuracy. There was, there's a line early in the film that I think you have to apply to the whole movie and that's when he's checking out the inverted bullets. And the scientist says, don't try to understand it, feel it. That's advice to the watcher. That's advice to the audience, right? But I think it was okay. I think some people was like, I don't have to like this movie. And then there was also some of the, I'm not ready to go back into the theaters, and Chris Nolan's trying to kill grandma, that sort of thing, right? And I heard all those things, especially when you go on to the internet, which is full of, of people who, putting out dumb podcasts.
Right.
Trying to tell you what to think, trying to figure it all out. But I enjoyed Tenet so much. Not a Zimmer soundtrack,
no,
but such a good soundtrack. One that I listen to sometimes when I'm working and I'm doing work stuff, spreadsheets, and I need something sort of fast paced. I'll toss that soundtrack on and just start to finish, let it go. That first 5 minutes in the Opera House at Tallinn.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I described it to someone. It was like, the most excitement you've ever had playing a first-person video game. It's kind of like that, like such well done, extremely intense, but also just brilliantly, choreographed and acted. It's interesting that Pattinson. Yeah, I agree. Right. I don't care. I think Robert Pattinson is a good actor that has gotten bad roles for the most part.
And before I saw or after seeing Tenet, I agree with you. He really blew me away in Tenet. It was a phenomenal performance and a phenomenal character, to your point that he just hadn't had the right material yet. And is it fair for, some dopey dude in the middle of the country to criticize anyone's acting career. No, it's not. But it's what we do because we're humans.
And we have a podcast.
And we have a podcast. Screw you, Robert Pattinson. You don't have a podcast.
Sparkly skin. I know that's real.
If you do have a podcast, I'd love to be on it.
All right, wait.
Anyway.
I invite Pattinson to come on here. And
Sure, he's welcome anytime too. We can talk about how great Tenet was. So I didn't see it in the theater. I was not comfortable at that point. For me, Nolan was 2 years too early. It was the first time I felt comfortable in a movie theater was Super Mario Brothers. It's that recent for me.
Wow.
Just because I'm a scaredy cat. But so there was no possible way I was going to see Tenet in the theater. I wish I could. I wish they'd bring it back, but it's despite how easy that is now with digital movies, nobody does that. Nobody's like, hey, we're going to throw Tenet back in the theaters for a week.
We have a local Alamo Draft House. They do some, but they're doing stuff that's like, the stuff that Ernest Cline would want to go see, right? Like 80s and 90s. Like, let's go watch The Thing.
Right.
Which I did, by the way. We went and saw The Thing at the Draft House. It was a blast. But I do wish that they'd throw Interstellar and that they would throw Tenet on, and butts would be in seats. Guaranteed.
My son and I drove past the now defunct Hollywood theaters in town, and we were talking about that, and he's like, you buy it and program your own movie theater. And I was like, oh, if only.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, so I didn't get to see Tenet in the theaters. When I saw Tenet at home, I loved it immediately.
Yep.
And it had me from the first 5 minutes of the movie. John David Washington, amazing.
He's such a great actor.
Good in this movie.
He's very understated, right? He's totally different than his dad, right?
Yes.
His dad's larger than life, and he's clicking his gums and pointing, all right, and he's Denzel Washington.
Right.
John David he's got his own style, and he's good. He's fantastic.
And he's got that one moment where he's like, I ordered my hot sauce an hour ago.
Yeah.
And that just goes into, it's nonstop from that moment on. I love it. I love the fact that it was kind of Nolan's Bond movie, his spy thriller. That's what he was trying to make with it. I love it. I love the time thing. Unlike Inception, which I knew I liked from the first time I saw it, but I did not understand the first time I saw it. Like, I understood enough of Tenet from the first viewing that I was like, okay, I'm following.
Yep.
Now, did I understand every nuance? Of course not. And every time I watch it, I see something new that I didn't realize before. But it's told competently enough that you don't walk out being like, I got nothing. I don't know what's happening. It's a clearly delineated story, and it's told brilliantly by Nolan, and the whole fire truck sequence is my favorite Nolan action sequence.
Really? Okay.
I love that whole process. I love how it's put together. I love how in the movie John David Washington is like, okay, this is what I need, and he starts just rattling off random stuff, and you're like, that makes no sense, and it all comes together in this perfectly delivered action sequence package that probably more than any other action sequence makes sense in the terms of the plot. It's not just a situation where, we're going to blow up some vehicles.
It's not a set piece.
Yeah.
Right.
It is necessary to what's happening. And then I love how that is its own action moment. And then it immediately evolves into the inverted car chase. And then you get that whole aspect of it. And then it's like, where is the temporal device and how they explain where that went in the process of it. I love it. I love Tenet. If it was not for The Dark Knight, Tenet would be my favorite Chris Nolan movie.
Wow. Okay. So no, Tenet is definitely it's sort of in the middle of the pack for me because top is Interstellar, and then past that is The Dark Knight, then the Prestige, and then Tenet and The Dark Knight Rises are tied. Okay. And then past that begins Inception, Memento, Insomnia, and then Dunkirk and following. Sort of at that unsorted bottom because I haven't fully made up my mind. I think Insomnia, it's second to last sort of on this list, which feels unfair because it's such a good movie.
Right.
But
when you're dealing with
great films, right? Somebody has to be at the top, somebody has to be at the bottom.
So I want to rewind just a hair.
Yeah.
Because Tenet, I think, got the most beat up over the whole sound design thing.
It did, and you got the face mask on. He loves to put people in masks, and then
so I will say this: I do not have a great home theater setup, and knowing this, I have an amazing gaming setup. So my wife had no interest in seeing Tenet. at the time. And so the first time I watched Tenet was on my gaming PC with my super high-end headphones, my giant monitor. So I'm not complaining. It's a great way to watch movies. But, you know, because that's also where I spend my day working. I've got a super comfortable chair. You know, believe me, I'm not hurting watching a movie on my computer. I know Christopher Nolan's freaking out right now, even at the thought of it. But it's a good setup. It's arguably better than my living room setup. So that's how I watched Tenet, with a fantastic pair of headphones, screen close to me. I had zero problems hearing anything anyone said.
Really? Okay.
Zero problems. And so that's why I asked in Interstellar, well, did you have that same problem in the theater? Because as we're trying to figure out where Nolan's coming from here, I wondered if, okay, well, maybe this is just a failing of home theaters, but it doesn't sound like that is. And since I didn't see Interstellar nor Tenet in theater, I really can't comment on that.
And I have a little bit of hearing loss. So, you know, as do quite a lot of people. And I'm not alone in that. And I think that particularly when it comes to mid-range sounds, which is where, you know, vocals live, right?
Sure.
So I just am sensitive to it, and I just hate that diminishes the enjoyment of something that otherwise is, I think, nearly perfect in terms of Nolan movies. That, but he's got a couple of them, 3 of them specifically, where vocals are it's not the easiest thing to pick up,
and we're not the only people saying that. I mean,
we're not the only ones saying that
across the board. So yeah, I'd love to know, and I have heard him say it's a stylistic choice. It's what I'm doing. Deal with it. I would like a little more clarification.
Yes, yeah, and I think he owes us that.
Well,
no, but you know, one thing I did after watching Tenet made a big impact on me. I took up as a hobby foils. Driving around the foil boats.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah, $10 million. I bought a couple.
Yeah,
and I crashed them, but you know,
you got to learn.
Yeah, I did a rent-to-own deal.
I love the scene with Michael Caine where he's like, Brooks Brothers isn't going to cut it.
Isn't going to cut it. Yeah. You don't have a monopoly on snobbery, more like a controlling interest. Yes,
but that's, I mean, again, what a cool detail.
Yes.
You know, and like he's trying to penetrate this society, and he's got to up his game. You know, he's got to play the part. He's got to do what these people do. So I don't know. It's marvelous. And then you find out that Pattinson was probably backwards the whole film. I mean, it's just, it's such a cool movie. That last battle sequence, where you've got the
so
two teams, so visually, the temporal pincer maneuver, so visually stunning. I mean, you know, and after 100 years of cinema, that Chris Nolan can still come out and put something on screen that's not like anything you've ever seen before. I mean, the guy is a talent.
In Interstellar, we had the future us helping the current us. And it's inverted in Tenet. The future us is trying to kill the current us. They're the antagonist. And just so smart. And, you know, it's just also entertaining.
Yeah,
right? I mean, it serves, I think, both purposes of being, you know, clever and interesting and makes you think. It also just, you enjoy it while you're munching your popcorn, right? Yeah. It's, you know, I don't know, and they did crash a real 747. Nolan's insistence on practical effects.
So this is why I love filmmaking. Not only Nolan's insistence on practical effects, but they did the numbers. You know, Nolan himself was like, I was planning on doing that miniature. They crunch the numbers, and it's cheaper to buy a 747 and crash it for real than it is to hire people to do models at that scale and at that quality, and then to add the CG that had to go into it, than it is to do it for real.
That's crazy.
It is so crazy.
That's neat.
Yeah, and I've had experience with film budgeting, certainly nothing on Chris Nolan's level, but to hear that and to kind of understand why I could believe that that's true. It's mind-boggling what goes into films of this scale. And honestly, Spielberg and Nolan, they're the only two people making films of this scale anymore. I mean, I do not think a Marvel movie is on the same scale.
No, especially now that they've got that technology from the Mandalorian that they're using throughout to lower the cost, which is fine, right? You know, lower the cost of movies. That's cool, but I think that's made the scale drop, and there's been a drop in quality along with that, frankly.
Agreed. And I love that Nolan's banging the drum of film.
Yep.
Oppenheimer is the first movie entirely shot on 70 millimeter IMAX, which is mind-blowing in 2023, because I think that at this point they're just making cameras for Chris Nolan.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I saw an article the other day that Oppenheimer's film reel is 11 miles long and weighs 600 pounds.
I probably read the same article you did. And it makes you wonder, like, when will he give in and shoot something digitally?
The thing is at his level and at his scale, he's right. There is no digital camera that can equal or even come close to 70 millimeter IMAX. I mean, you've got some cameras, 35 millimeter film is done. Like you've got digital cameras that have surpassed 35 mil. 70 mil, not even close.
Interesting. I just wonder if at some point he might take it as a technical challenge. Like, okay, I'm going to work inside this constraint and see what I can produce, right? Because constraint does breed creativity, right?
Agreed.
And I would be interested just as an experiment to see what he's able to do.
I don't know. There have been, and I'm, if I could shoot film, if somebody would let me do it, I'd be thrilled. I've never worked on anything of that budget. And there have been some remarkable films that would not look the way they do if it were not for digital cameras. And I'm specifically thinking of Skyfall. If you remember the sequence where the action scene is happening with the LED walls behind them that have the squids and
I haven't seen that movie
in
years.
Well, that's fair.
I saw it in the theater when it first came out and immediately forgot it.
Yeah, it's not a great film, but that sequence is a great sequence. that sequence is the reason to see the movie, and that impossible to shoot on celluloid. It just isn't. Film can't resolve light that way, but digital can. So there are reasons to have each, and there are reasons to use each. I just love the fact that Nolan is the guy that's still banging the drum, and he's like, you're not only are you going to do this for me, but you're also going to figure out a way to invent black and white IMAX film for me to make Oppenheimer. You're just going to do it.
They didn't have that before.
They did not have black and white film stock.
Wow.
Yep. All right. That's the kind of guy we're talking about. And he deserved an episode of this podcast.
Well, I think he just got one. And then, we're going to come back around, right? When this will be published around the same time that as folks are listening to this.
Yes, so this will post just a few days before Oppenheimer comes out in theaters, even though we're recording it a little bit ahead of time. I was streaming
backwards in time towards the moment of Oppenheimer, right?
Release. This is all, I mean, you are, but I'm coming. I'm coming to meet you.
I hope you can understand the words that are coming out of my mouth. Chris Tucker was in several Christopher Nolan movies.
That's not true. Unless it's several future ones that you've seen that I haven't.
They streamed back at me in time. And in the future, Chris Tucker is like an A-plus level actor. He's doing Shakespeare.
We should have led with that headline.
Well, I just learned it. It just streamed back at me. That's how it works. You don't think about it. Just
feel it. You're right. You're absolutely right. Well, we hope you enjoyed our dissection of Chris Nolan's filmography, and then we'll talk about Oppenheimer when it gets here too. So
yes, we'll have a special discussion of Oppenheimer at some point, either a bonus ep, maybe.
We'll see. I did look to see how close a film version of it was, and bit of a drive, so I don't know if I'll be making that.
Where was it? Because I looked in Missouri and there was none. So
I had an email out to you that it was like, we leave Springfield at 6:30 a.m. We watched and I was looking at the times and I just deleted the email.
Yeah,
I'm like, nah, forget it.
And I'm such a bad. I barely drive anymore. You do not want me attempting to drive. It'd be easier if I just bought his plane tickets.
So anyway, no film Oppenheimer for us. But
no.
That's okay.
Go see it at the Draft House.
Yeah, that's my plan.
Or in IMAX.
I'll probably, if I can't see it in film, I'll probably just go to the Draft House.
At least it's comfortable and the popcorn's delicious.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, Chris Nolan, we're big fans. We hope you're listening to this episode.
I know. It'd be something else if we get an email from Chris.Nolan at
chrisnolan.com.
chrisnolan.com. Dear fellas.
Well, he can email us at us the number 2, middleagedguys.com.
That's right. Or check us out on Facebook, on Twitter. We don't have a TikTok yet.
No.
My wife has been suggesting that we get a TikTok, which would require us to make videos.
Yeah, my daughter, who should be working, called me the other day, and she's like, I've been thinking about your podcast. You need to get on TikTok. And I'm like, what?
You know what? Let's really, tick.talk at tiktok.com. Email us.
That's not going to go
We got to come up with an idea.
Yes. So anyway, reach out to us on the socials we actually have. And until next time, we hope you enjoyed listening.
Bye, folks.